Keys to the Commonwealth, a podcast where we share the real stories of local community members who are using real estate to build personal wealth, along with tips and tricks from professionals across the industry. And now, your host, Landry Fields.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to another Keys to the Commonwealth podcast episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Nova Insurance, where we love people through insurance, whether that's your business, real estate portfolio, home, auto, or life. We work as independent risk advisors to find the best coverages and options for your unique needs. I'm very excited for today's guest. It's been a long time coming. I've been wanting to have him on the show for us. He is a real estate investor of over 40 years. And says his most proud accomplishment in real estate was owning two of the oldest and largest historical buildings here in Lexington at one time. I think it was in Lexington. He can clarify that in a minute. And so I want to welcome him to the show. His name is Biff Buckley, and he was born and raised right here in Lexington. He's married to his beautiful bride, Elizabeth. And I want to just welcome you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, Landry. Great to be here with you.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, obviously, that know your name around, just from different circles and different backgrounds, not always in real estate necessarily. It could be ministry. It could be previous career before that. And insurance, ironically enough, I'm following some of that similar path, yep. Ironically, unintentionally. But yeah, hop back in the DeLorean and explain a little bit how you got into real estate investing to begin with.
Sure. I come from a family of insurance agents. We had our own agency called Buckley and Company Insurance. It was an independent agency. We represented a lot of different companies, just like Nova does. And I was third generation. So when I started in the business in 1972, my grandfather was in the business, and my father was in the business, and I was in the business, and we all had the same name.
Right.
It wasn't Biff, it was Benjamin Franklin Buckley, the junior, the third, and I was the fourth. So it was definitely a family business, 3 generations. And
typically insurance, it finds you because of the family, or it finds you in general. Usually you don't find insurance, it seems like.
Yes, that's true. But it was a great opportunity, and I knew that. And Dad was always open with me, saying, son, there's an opportunity here if you want it, but feel free, go where you think you should be. And I kind of stayed away from it for a while, but then at age 22, I realized, this is really too good of a deal to pass up. I felt like I could be good at it. And jumped in with both feet, and it was wonderful. Yeah. And the challenge of building an insurance agency was great.
Yeah.
But where real estate comes in is Dad said to me one day, I was in my mid to late 20s, he said, son, you can make a decent living in this industry, the insurance industry. But if you want to build generational wealth, if you want to have something to retire on, he said, you need to consider some other type of investment that will grow in value over time. And he said, real estate has been a great vehicle for that, for your grandfather and for me, because they both owned rental property, separate from each other, but they both owned rental property.
Sure.
And I thought, that's right. And so I began to study. I began to read books. At that time, there were no podcasts. So I just began to read different books.
Or YouTube, so you could just look
No
at
YouTube. Absolutely. I love YouTube, and I love podcasts. I'm grateful that they have come along. And fortunately or unfortunately, I find I'm doing a lot less reading than I used to and more listening. But it is a great tool to learn. So I began to learn, think about it, learn the advantages of it, which we can talk about later, and decided I wanted to do it. And decided that I read about 2 sixplexes that were being auctioned on the courthouse steps. So the owner had stopped making payments, the bank had foreclosed, Master Commissioner is selling these. Probably not done this way anymore. I don't know how it's done, but it's
Master
literally.
Commissioner is still a thing that I know of. I've not been. I got invited actually to the Jessamine County one a couple of days ago. I was tied up at the time. Yeah.
Well, it was literally on the courthouse steps, the old courthouse building, downtown Lexington, on the steps at 12 noon, and every other Monday or something like that.
Old courthouse is where Visit Lex and some of the restaurants and stuff like that are now, right?
Yeah, Zim's.
Yeah, Zim's. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, did a little research on these two properties that were going to be auctioned, and I figured what I thought was a fair market value, and ended up being the high bidder.
Okay.
And that was scary.
Right. You're like, wait a minute. Do they know something I don't?
Absolutely. I mean, this was my first deal, and I thought, I was glad that I got it. I was afraid that I got it.
Sure.
I didn't know what I'd gotten. I didn't know what I'd gotten into. Fortunately, I'd talked to the bank before I showed up, so I kind of knew what my capacity was with the bank, and I got a good enough deal that I didn't have to put a lot of money into it. The bank loaned me most of it, and so all of a sudden I go from owning nothing other than my home to having 2 sixplexes. So I had 12 in either individuals or families that they looked to me as their landlord or property owner, and they had to give me a check each month, and I had to take care of whatever maintenance issues they might have. I had to take care of vacancies, started getting tons of phone calls, and I'm right in the middle of trying to build my insurance agency business. And it created all kinds of internal problems in me, frustration that, I'd show up at the property and the people that wanted to rent it wouldn't be there. Or I'd show up on the property to meet a roofer to repair something, and he wouldn't show up. And all I could think about was, I need to be at the office working. And in that day, we didn't have the technology that we have today.
Right.
Texting and things like that.
Or I was going to say, even on the insurance side, the idea I always heard about with the forms and having to fill out manual forms all over the place and mail things in. And now it's just a click of a button type of a thing. It's a lot different world for me.
Absolutely. It was. The analog world was different. So anyway, that created a lot of frustration. I did not feel like I was doing a good job as a landlord. I didn't feel like I was doing a good job for my career and my employer, my father and grandfather at that point. And so I decided that I had to sell this asset and had to rethink real estate and rethink, how can I do this? If I have a conviction that real estate in the long run is a good way to build wealth, if I have that conviction, how can I do that? Because this way is not working. And so I managed to sell it, broke even, which was a victory. So then I just praying about it, thinking through and saying, Lord, how do I do this? Because I really did have a conviction that I was supposed to do this and that there was opportunity here. And I felt like I just needed to find a partner that could handle the day-to-day. We would be 50-50 partners. We would figure out a way for the partnership to pay my partner something extra for his time. Right. And move forward. So that's the point I met my friend Greg Sally. And we've been partners now for probably pushing 40 years. And still have our partnership intact. Wow. Can you believe that?
There's a lot of people that swear by not having partners or something like that. But if you find a good one, it really can be the biggest blessing of all. Nothing sticks closer than a brother kind of a mentality. And I'm definitely blessed, I think, to have found that as well.
Well, to own and operate it yourself is great if you've got the time. Maybe the ideal way. If you've got the time and the talent to do it. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time, and I didn't have the talent on the maintenance side. He was really handy, able to do a lot of the work himself or oversee somebody else doing it. Yep. I was pretty good at locating some properties, analyzing them, and getting the bank financing.
That's exactly my role too.
You know what I'm talking about. I really like the kind of high-level stuff, and he liked being down in the weeds and doing stuff. So that's the best kind of partnership, is where you complement each other.
Well, like a marriage in that sense.
Right. He plays a role that either I can't do or I'm not interested in, and then I play a role either he can't do or is not interested in.
Right.
And it's just been a great partnership. And today we own roughly 275 rental units in four different buildings, four different locations. So 275 units. And
4 locations. Wow.
Yeah, four different locations.
Just you and him, or is there some syndications involved with that?
No, just the two of us.
And that's a whole other story about, I'm sure, growing, starting out with probably more like single families, duplexes and things, and then being able to eventually roll that into bigger opportunities, I'm sure.
Yeah, I did not go that route. That's a perfectly good route to go. The single, where you build up a portfolio of single families and you either keep them.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got one friend that you probably know. I think he's got 120 single family houses in town, and he loves it. That's his model.
Yeah.
He's sticking to it and rarely deviates from it.
Right.
But in my case, I felt like multifamily offered, under one roof, you've got in one building, we've got 64 units under one roof. Well, that's a very efficient way of doing things.
Yeah.
You got one loan for 64 different doors, and just one set of utilities to figure out. Anyway, it's a very efficient way.
Sure.
So the return for me, I believe the returns have been better, and the cash flow has been better. The risk is greater,
sure,
granted, but the reward is greater. So there's so many ways to do real estate successfully and build wealth over the long term. Lots of different ways, but none of them are without risk. You just have to be a prudent risk taker.
It's kind of interesting because now that we've been in it for 3 or 4 or 4 or 5 months now, I guess it's been definitely a blessing to the fact that our first 7 units have all been on the same court, actually.
Oh, that's efficient.
And, it was efficient. And now that we've been in it, the more we were like, well, how great that's been. Hey, plumber, we need you to look at this one. And then, while you're there, let's go over here across the other street, and in that sense.
Really?
And but that's been great too, as far as the neighbors getting to know us and be appreciative of what the value we're trying to improve the value of that area that we're in there, north side of Lexington. They've been appreciative of that, improved. I think obviously we're helping their value of their properties in some respects, as well as just others that have been approached us to say, hey, if we ever sell, would you be interested? And we're like, yeah. Give us a call, type of thing. So yeah.
Nice.
It's good. So, as far as the advantage of obviously with real estate and wealth building, I definitely see it as there was always a thing in the back of my mind, in my 20s, kind of saying, I wonder how effective or efficient or the idea of a traditional, relying solely on traditional 401k or just the government or some of those things that were obviously a lot more hard and fast kind of things that for my grandparents or my parents and so forth. But I was like, you know what? I really don't know if that stuff is going to be there or if it'll look the same and so forth. And so that's really what got me down that along with, it seemed like, every 25% of my clients seem to have their own, at least one rental property or something like that. And you're like, I think I really need to get into something like that in some respects with the right partnership to, again, leverage that for, not only me, myself and my wife and our family, but just the future of our family or the future of being able to use that to impact other people in some form or fashion through ministries or other stuff like that. And so, and again, as far as retirement in some respects as well.
Yeah.
So how have you seen that change, I think? Or have you seen that similar kind of questions?
Yeah, real estate, to me, the advantages have been, there's nothing like having a tenant, a resident, pay off your mortgage.
Yeah. Simple as that.
You know, the first vacation I went on after I had some properties under my belt, I turned to my wife and I said, you know, we're on vacation, we're not working, but you know who is working? Our tenants.
Yeah.
And they're paying, they're making their rental payments to us, and we are making our bank payment, and we're not doing anything but sitting here on the beach.
Yeah.
So, you know, to have your tenants pay, I mean, this is real estate 101, so you sophisticated listeners, you'll know all of this, but for the beginner, the advantage of real estate is you've got a resident or a tenant paying you monthly.
Sure.
That you can turn around and flip to the bank. So you're paying it down every month. What you owe on that goes down, while at the same time, the value, in most cases, the value increases. Not always, and it's not in a straight line, but the value increases. And usually you can get rental increases over time. And then there are tax advantages. Real estate is one of the few investment vehicles where you can depreciate it, which creates a paper loss, not a real loss, but a paper loss so you have income coming in from it, but you shelter that from the tax person, from the IRS, as a result of this depreciation. And on larger, sophisticated deals, they've got this thing called what is it? I've done it several times and I love it. Cost segregation studies.
Yeah.
So you can do a cost segregation study where you involves an engineer and an accountant, and you accelerate the depreciation. Instead of being straight line, you can accelerate it, you front load it, which gives you even more more depreciation to shelter your income from the investment.
Now, what are those situations where usually that's more applicable to?
Yeah, I don't think so. A cost seg study and accelerated depreciation would not. I don't think there's some cost to do that. You got to hire an engineer that does a study, and you got to pay a CPA a little bit. So if it's just a single family, maybe a duplex, I don't think I think the expenses would not be worth, or the tax advantages, the depreciation wouldn't be worth the expenses. But at some level, I don't know whether it's a fourplex, but I'll just pick a number out of the air and say definitely 20 units and above, and definitely commercial property, whether it's a warehouse property, retail, strip center, all of those are large enough that the cost seg study is definitely worth doing. Yeah.
Especially on like a new acquisition type of format.
Yeah, it's usually done at the time of acquisition. Yeah. There may be some instances where it can be done after the fact. That would be a CPA question.
Yeah. What's the kind of, I know you've got a mix right now. What's the portfolio look right now? Because you've got some other strict commercial stuff as well too, right?
Yeah. So I started out with just multifamily, and that's gone great, and let's just stay with multifamily for a minute.
Right.
So after a while, my partner was full time, but he didn't really have the capacity to take on another project, and so I found another partner. And we bought 143 units together around UK. That's Anthony Humphreys.
Yeah.
And we bought, they're in like 10 different buildings, but they were all built as apartments. They're not converted houses. And so I did it replicated what I did in my first partnership. So the new partnership's 143 units, and we pay his management company a percentage of the rents to manage it, and then we split any profits 50-50.
Yeah.
And that was great. And I do like student housing, and it's a special breed of property, and you got to know what you're doing in terms of rental seasons. But but my partner knew all of that, and so that's just been a great partnership. And then same guy, I sold a downtown historic office building that we can talk about later, and we decided to do a 1031 tax-free exchange and buy 125 units complex out Richmond Road. And the only problem was that it involved a loan assumption. We were assuming the loan of the seller.
Yep.
And with the 1031 tax-free exchanges, the rules are very specific. And if you don't meet certain deadlines, you lose your exchange. Right. You lose the tax-free. Now, you can still buy the property, but you're going to have to pay a capital gains tax on your gain from the property you're selling.
Correct.
And so because this was a loan assumption, different entities were dragging their feet, and we couldn't get it closed in time. So I did have to pay income tax on the sale of the downtown historic building, and that was okay because the deal was good enough that I was going into.
Sure.
I didn't mind doing that. So in that transaction, I picked up another 125 units. So that leaves me with a total of 533 rental unit apartment or doors, as they say in the industry, rental units in 7 different locations roughly.
Yeah.
All in Lexington.
Oh, wow. All in Lexington. That is amazing.
Yeah.
And then, I want to get into it a little bit here as far as, real quick, what were the 2 older properties that you did? Historic buildings.
Yeah. So this was, you'll find this interesting, Landry, because I used my insurance operation as a way
to
know
prospect,
people, don't you? As a way to prospect for potential real estate to buy.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? You're totally innocent of such a thing. So when I would deliver renewal insurance policies, I specialized. Buckley & Company Insurance did all kinds of insurance, but I personally liked commercial property, and I sort of specialized in that, not exclusively, but I was very intentional about trying to write as much of that kind of business as I could. And so when I would deliver the renewal policies, go over it with my client, make sure everything was in order, I would always say, hey, if you're ever interested in selling this, be sure and let me know. I might be interested, or I'll know somebody that's interested.
Yeah.
And so I was delivering the renewal insurance policy to former Mayor Foster Pettit.
Okay.
And he owned the First National building at Main and Upper, one of the oldest buildings in Lexington. And he said, I think I might want to talk to you about that. So I said, hey, put something together so that I understand the finances and the expenses and the income potential, and let's talk about it. So I did, ended up buying it from him, and it turned out to be a great deal. And similarly, the second oldest building was a security trust building at the corner of Short and Mill that I had insured, and Mr. Wayne Lawless, both these guys are deceased now, said the same thing, said he would be willing to sell, and I ended up buying that too. So I had the 2 oldest, and I ended up selling the First National building to 21C, the hotel company, and they spent a lot of money, did a major renovation. It's a beautiful building. Got a restaurant in there, as you probably know, and then just 2 years ago, I sold the security trust building, and that's the one I exchanged into the 125 unit apartment building.
Gotcha.
So the old buildings have been good to me, but they are old buildings and they require a lot of money to upkeep. Yes. So I'm very glad I've gotten out of those.
I can imagine that.
Yeah.
Speaking of, as far as the building itself, I wanted to ask your thoughts, just so I'm not the one talking about it, 'cause from the expertise of, but obviously this, I deal with this on day in, day out, and the idea of replacement costs on buildings or co-insurance and so forth like that can be it's a very important topic and conversation when we're talking about insuring someone's structure or the commercial building or whatnot, and they're trusting us to advise them correctly on that, but so that I'm not the one speaking to this, jump back and put your insurance hat back on to some respects and just kind of talk about that. We can kind of chat real quick a little bit about that and the importance of it.
Sure. Replacement, when you own a building, whether it's a rental house or an apartment community or a downtown high rise, if something happens and you've got a total loss, especially if it's a total loss, you've got to get enough funds back from the insurance company to rebuild that. Mm-hmm. And the tendency is for us as property owners is to want to keep the premium down and not want to increase the values that we insure for on our commercial investments. And that's a short-sighted way to go about it. Mm-hmm. You really need to keep the value you choose to insure your asset at needs to be equal to the replacement cost. Well, the replacement cost goes up every year. Sure. But it's just...
Especially in the last couple of years with the inflation in price of material and labor and so forth.
So it's just real important to do that. You will not regret it at time of loss.
Did you ever work a lot with, obviously, blanketing, portfolios in some respects? And I would speak to that a little bit because, that can be a great asset as someone expands to have a lot of properties as a way to sometimes help the cost of it a little bit while also still kind of giving yourself a pretty good protection by blanketing the coverage between the buildings type of thing. Yeah.
So when you have multiple buildings, instead of having a specific amount on each one, you can figure out what the total value is of all of them together and insure for that limit, all of your buildings for that one limit. And then if any one building is damaged or destroyed, then you've got a really high number that will be more than enough to replace any one building. So that's called blanketing. Yeah. So if you can picture throwing a blanket over 5 different buildings.
And that's usually for me the only time I'm willing to kind of do a little bit of the co-insurance portion if you're wanting to maybe insure that, let's say your total value of your buildings is $10 million, but maybe you're insuring it for $9 million in the case that you're betting against not losing every building at the exact same time. You're still covered with using that blanket coverage.
That's true. You can cut a few corners with the blanket in terms
once
of
you get to a certain size, for sure. Because but if you just got 1 or 2, that's definitely something you don't want to cut corners on by any means in that sense.
Correct.
Yeah. So some tools like that, and that's what we're trying to help out, as you're well aware of in that sense. Yeah. To advise on that, because I tell people all the time, I know insurance is a foreign language to pretty much anyone that is not in insurance in that respect. Kind of jumping into a little bit of your personal stuff. What are some of your unique hobbies or skills that that you like to do when you're not talking real estate or putting your insurance hat back on? Which I assume you probably try to not put your insurance hat back on anymore at all.
When I sold my agency 9 years ago, I enjoyed. I was just telling a guy this morning at breakfast. I said I enjoyed every minute of running my own business, but when it was over, it was over. I'm the kind of guy that is always living in the moment and looking forward. And so in that sense, I haven't looked back. Yeah. But my hobbies, my interests outside are, let's talk about hobbies first. Okay. So the hobbies would be, I just love motorcycle riding.
Right. And I did not know that about you until I saw that.
Yeah, and particularly touring. And I love fishing and bass fishing and fishing the different lakes in Kentucky. But, I love motorcycling so much that my son and I, on separate bikes, rode all the way to Alaska from Lexington and back.
How long was that trip? A month?
Took almost a month. Took 3.5 weeks, 9,500 miles.
Wow.
and we had a blast. So had to go all the way through Canada, of course.
Is there a lot of callus after that?
Calluses, yeah. Calluses on your bottom, calluses on your hand from holding onto the throttle, and a lot of calluses. But
That's wild.
It was great, and it was great doing it with my son.
Yeah.
But since I sold my business 9 years ago, I have, let me back up by saying when I was 22 and just starting in the insurance business, I had a profound experience where I came to the understanding that the Bible really was God's word, that Jesus really is the living Son of God. And those were things that I'd struggled with before and would specifically say I didn't accept that. I didn't agree with that.
Right.
But some things happened, and all of a sudden I came to that understanding that those were real and those were important. And so when I retired, when I sold my business, I thought, I want to help people see what I came to see and understand at age 22. And so I began Bible studies in different businesses around town. And I've got one Monday noon, one Wednesday at 8, one Thursday at 8, one Friday at 8 a.m. And these are all in conference rooms spread around town.
Yeah.
And they're business people that come. And we just have a blast, and we just learn about how to do life God's way. And that's my real focus today. Well, still doing real estate, but I'm doing it, even though I'm free from the insurance world, I so like the model of doing business with partners who have the time and expertise to give to it, that once I had the time and the expertise, I didn't take advantage of it because I wanted to do this Bible study, follow this Bible study model. And so I've stayed with the same thing, and I've got a number of different partners, direct partnerships, syndications. I'm involved in a number of deals, but they're all what we call passive.
Yeah.
I don't have to do anything, and except cash the check, which is a nice position to be in.
And anybody that knows you obviously knows that, you do so much as far as giving back, whether it's professionally or expertise on being a husband or a father or, scripture and Bible aspects and stuff like that. And if you haven't run into Biff at Panera in Palomar, that's all you have to do is probably walk in there like I do and pretty much see you almost every time.
That's my new office.
That's right. It was my office, which is how we got to know each other more during COVID in that respect a little bit. I was definitely, I would show up there pretty much almost on the daily for a period of time as well. Yeah. As far as what was one of your favorite trips that you've ever taken? Outside of the Alaska trip.
Gosh, the last one, we earlier this year, my wife and I went to Tuscany, which is in Italy. It's a Florence area, just a beautiful area. And we rode bicycles. Now, there were about 25 people on this trip, and you had the choice of riding a regular bicycle or an electric bike.
Okay.
So because of the hilly nature of the terrain, my wife and I have decided to take the electric bike, which you can pedal as much as you want, but when you're tired of pedaling, you can cause the electric to kick in and boost you. And but it was just
the whole experience even more enjoyable.
Really, there's so much to see, and it was just a great trip.
My wife she'll subtly just keep sending me like these little TikTok or Instagram videos of like people traveling through Italy or something like that. So eventually I hope to do that. That would be great. What was your first car you ever owned?
First car was a 1965 Chevy Impala Super Sport.
Okay.
So
kind of still wish you had it, or no?
Oh yeah, now I wish I had it. But
that's right.
At the time, when it started getting some age, actually that. But to answer your question, I wish I had it. However, I sold it at one point, and it enabled me to go and finance a trip around Europe at age 21.
Okay.
backpacking and hitchhiking and all that, and I was able to stay over there 4 months.
4 months?
4 months. Wow. And because I sold the car. Now, when I got back, I had to go back to work. And
did you see Giant's Causeway?
Giant's Causeway, no.
In Ireland, Northern Ireland?
No.
Okay.
No. I didn't get to Northern Ireland. I didn't get to Ireland at all. I got to, of course, England and Scotland. Yeah.
I've not done a ton of England, Scotland, France, or Italy or any of those, but for some reason I've been to Germany and I've been to Ireland / Northern Ireland and stuff like that. Giant's Causeway is beautiful. You'd have to look it up to explain what it is. I'll tell you about it.
Thank you.
But last question. I mean, if anybody ever wanted, obviously they can run into you probably at the Panera in Palomar, or if they wanted to just email you or get in touch if you wanted just a real estate advice or life advice, I know you're always willing to give in that way. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Feel free to, anybody that has follow-up questions probably the best way would just be my email address. Biff, B-I-F-F, Buckley, B-U-C-K-L-E-Y @gmail.com. So just shoot me an email if you want to talk more about anything.
Well, it's an easy conversation to have when talking to you. I was just always appreciative. You always care and always ask me how I'm doing. So I always appreciate that as well. So appreciate your time today. Thank you for, again, listening to another episode of the Keys to Commonwealth podcast. Subscribe if you would. And again, Biff, appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Landry.
Thanks.
To learn more about this podcast, visit our page at keystothecommonwealth.com. To connect with Landry regarding insuring your investment portfolio, email Landry at novainsuranceGroup.com or call 859-687-2004.